Yo, we get to listen to Jose slurp down his his drop of water. Welcome back to all those who tune in. We're excited to be with you today. And me and Jose were having a conversation prior to jumping on this call with regards to what our actual job is, and one of the main things that we get compensated the most to do. The reason why you can make the big bucks is you help people to actually make decisions. And most people's tendency in our experience, independent of motivation, is to stall to some degree. You know what I mean?
Procrastinate.
Like, procrastinate, kind of stall, want to slow things down. So a main objection we'll get, which we covered last week, and we're going to cover more in depth this week and today, is I want to think about it. And keeping in mind that when people say they want to think about it, that's really what's happening, is that what they're wanting to do is just slow down the process a little bit. And from an emotional perspective, there's like a little bit of an emotional roadblock, and that's quite normal. I think a lot of people, Jose, really get discouraged when people say something like that. At the same time, if they really think about it, whenever they're going to make a big decision that requires not even a meaningful amount of money, they usually stall too. Like they'll keep something in their Amazon like queue for like a week before they'll actually buy it, you know what I'm saying? Which is like a form of stalling. So that's been your experience as well, correct?
Yeah, 100%. It is. And I think for me, I need to think about it objection was a frustrating one. And the reason it was a frustrating one is I didn't have a roadmap as to how to help people make the decision and how to help people move forward in the process, basically. I also think that, and you've mentioned this as well too, or you actually were the one that said this, is that for us to expect people to make decisions that affect hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line and to pay $40,000-$50,000 in brokers' commissions, and we're over here not like stalling on a $2,000 decision. We're over here stalling on a $3,000 decision. So it's very hard for people to help people make decisions if you have trouble committing to things. It's very hard to get people to commit to things if you have trouble committing to things. So I believe that this is a skill, and this is why top listing agents get paid the big bucks. If they can help people decide, they can help people commit, they can help people make decisions. That's the difference between 3 listings and 10 listings. So in our last episode, we covered the I need to think about it. We covered the track as to how to uh, what the talk track is and what are the different things that come up. Today, we're going to be breaking them down. So the first thing that could come up is somebody says, well, I actually don't know if I'm 100% ready to make the move, or I'm considering renting it, or I need to wait on this. How would you handle that, Novello? And what would be your line of questioning in that situation?
Yeah, so I just want to get clarity, right? So the first thing is to not allow that to like leak out into your body language or like your facial expressions that you're somehow like disappointed, right? So instead, just being like, yeah, that's perfectly okay. You know, I'm here to help you. I'm never here to talk you into doing anything. If it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is just ask a couple quick questions with the intention and the goal, hopefully, that you can get a little bit more clarity, and then you can decide what you feel is best. And whether it's sooner or later you decide to sell or you don't, you'll have everything you need so you can make the best decision that you feel most comfortable with. Does that sound okay? And they're like, yeah,
It
that's.
does.
So I guess tell me this, like, is it a serious consideration or option for you to perhaps not sell the property and still accomplish what you want and then be quiet? Now, I should have asked this in pre-qual.
Mhm.
You know, at the same time, even if you asked and they said yes, and now when they see what the marketplace is actually showing them as realistic, that may
And
cause them
it
to
may
hesitate.
resurface it, and it may resurface it again.
Yeah, and it resurfaces again. So it may cause them to like recoil or like hesitate a little bit. And the reason why I'm asking it again is to really get clarity around that. So let's say you're like, well, not really. It's like, all right. And then I guess I'm wondering, because again, I'm here to help. Whatever option makes the most sense for you guys is what we'll do. Is it an option for you to maybe just like rent the property and still move and then be quiet and see what they say? They're like, well, you know, let's say they say, well, yeah, Jose, I mean, we could always do that. All right. And then I guess I'm curious, have you ever been a long distance landlord before? And then be quiet. And
No.
he's like, well, no. It's like, okay. And the reason that I'm asking is because, I'm imagining when you make this move, you guys are going to be really focused in that area. And if you end up being the long distance landlord, that's just another thing for you guys to consider. So if you did go that route, do you think you would hire a property manager? And they're like, well,
Uh,
go ahead.
I mean, what should I do? I mean, if I did go in that route.
Yeah, I mean, with the move, and I know you're moving for work and stuff, like I have to imagine you and your wife are going to be completely dialed in and focused on just getting settled into your new location. So if you did decide to go that route, it would probably make sense to hire a property manager. Did you know they take 10% of the gross rents to manage the property?
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, and then the other thing to consider is would your goal, do you think, would be to hold on to the property for an extended period of time, or it would just be like maybe just to rent for a year in hopes that the marketplace comes up and then try to sell it again?
I don't think it would be for a long period of time.
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right. So the thing to consider is that if you did decide to rent it, if you rent it for 2 out of 5 years, what that would mean, Jose, is you would have to pay capital gains tax on your proceeds. Have you thought about that?
I didn't even know that. So you're saying if I rent it out for more than 3 years, then I would have to pay taxes on it, basically.
Yeah, because you have to live in it for 2 out of 5 in order for it to be a homesteaded property and not pay capital gains. So if you
Mhm.
rented it on that after 2 years, if you rented it again, then you would have to pay capital gains. So what that would mean then is you would have to sell the property for at least 20% more than what you could today just to kind of break even on that tax bill. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Man, but I think the market will probably go up in the next year, So that's kinda at least my hope, that,
Yeah.
that it does come up?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And trust me, I go to bed every night hoping and wishing and praying that it does. It makes my job a lot easier, makes these conversations a lot more fun. At the same time, Jose, my grandfather, he shared with me something when I was a young man. He said, "You, hope is a beautiful word, but it's not the best business strategy." Right. So, what would happen on the outside chance if on a year from now it didn't sell? Like, what would that, or the market didn't go up dramatically? Like, what would that mean for you and your family?
Well, I think at that point, we would, just be stuck holding on to a rental that we probably don't want, basically.
Mm. So, is that something that is like a serious consideration or option for you?
Probably not, no.
Okay. All right. So, what I'm imagining is really happening here, what I'm sensing from you, Jose, is that the only reason that you're even thinking about that is because the marketplace is showing us a price that perhaps is a little bit less than, what your initial expectation was. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, I get that. And at the same time, you're beginning to recognize that if you made a decision to rent, that could end up affecting your plans. It also could end up affecting finances. And it really seems like what's in your best interest is to proceed and to get it on the market. So I guess I'm curious, because that when we look here and we look at the net sheet, it shows here based on what the marketplace is showing us as reasonable, you guys would net like, 250 from the sale. Would that allow you to make this transaction happen?
It would, yeah.
All right. And then what would you be, if you don't mind?
It's not what I want, but it would allow me to do it.
Yeah, I know. I know. I want you to trust me, while we're at it, I'd love to, get more because we get compensated more the more we help you sell it for. And I guess I'm curious, is your intention to reallocate this capital to the next destination? Is that what the
Yeah,
goal in
well, at first, I think we were planning on just renting out where we're at right now at the present moment, and
Mhm.
then out there, and then kinda getting to know the area and then buying something at some point, basically.
Okay. So then being that that's the case, whatever you're perceiving perhaps to be a little bit less here, when you reallocate that capital where you're going, I guess I'm wondering, do you get more bang for your buck out there?
Oh, I mean, I would be almost buying something out in cash, but to be honest, like, I didn't wanna buy something immediately. Like, I
Mhm.
wanted to just kinda get to know the area, make sure that I'm in a good neighborhood, before I actually move in, but, I mean, if a good opportunity came up, we would potentially consider it. Um, we would consider it.
Yeah, I have to imagine you can always put that capital in like a high bearing savings account right now. You can get like 4 or 5% on the money, and then you can shop with confidence. And if you see something that really fits your criteria, for you and Mariela, you could always just proceed. I mean, do you think that would be a better position to put your family in versus having the capital tied up here?
I I do believe that. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too. So being that we're in agreement with regards to, what the marketplace is showing us is realistic, and also that it actually would be better for you and your family to be in a position where you have the cash, can shop with confidence, no rush, one less thing to be concerned about, money's earning money there. I mean, it seems like the next logical step would just be to proceed and take care of the appropriate paperwork so we can get the process started. How's that sound?
Oh man. Yeah. So that was handled perfectly. Here's what I noticed is
Yeah.
obviously you're like the whole goal is to help them make a decision. Here's some additional things that I would add to our viewers. So I would, in some cases, when I ask them, well, if you did rent it, I kind of like dig a little bit deeper on that. I'd be like, okay, just out of curiosity, if you did rent it, what do you think that you could basically rent out the property for? And they
Hmm.
may say, well, I think I can get like, I did this last night. They're like, oh, I think I can get $8,000 a month. Like, okay. And just out of curiosity, what are the monthly obligations on the property? And
Hmm.
she said, they're $6,000 a month. And I'm like, okay, so basically, if you did rent it, you would make about $2,000 of positive cash flow every single month. I'm like, would you be prepared, like, if the tenant didn't pay the rent? Like, would that work for you? Like, meaning, like, if the tenant missed a month or missed 2 months or missed 3 months, would you have the financial resources to be able to cover that payment during that time and also cover it during the other place? If repairs came up, would you be in a financial position to be able to cover that? And what percolated to the surface was like that the risk to reward ratio wasn't in balance, meaning like, yeah, she's making $2,000 a month, bro, but dude, the risk is high because if that tenant doesn't make the payment, there's a $6,000 payment that's on the line. Another question that I ask sometimes is I'll ask them, do you have any plans to ever move back to California? Or do you have any plans to ever move back to Florida? And the reason I ask that is I notice a trend or a pattern that sometimes when people eventually have plans to move back to that state, they may keep the property as a rental because they're keeping it as a backup plan or as insurance in case they ever move back
And
or
they'll
in case
keep it
they like it.
and they'll keep it regardless because it's like a security blanket sort of
It's a
thing.
security
So
blanket.
so the thing that I want everybody to get clear on and what me and Jose are doing, if you notice, is we're just asking a series of detailed questions to make sure that they're really clear because sometimes that's just a knee-jerk reaction, right? So have you ever been a landlord before? I'm wondering if you did decide to rent it, what were you thinking? Because another scenario that popped up while you were saying that, Jose, is they're like, yeah, I'm thinking 8 grand. And that the last one rented for like 6,500 bucks. And you're
Yeah,
like, yeah,
you would even say something like that. When they say 8 grand, be like, what if I told you that the market rent was about $6,500 a month?
hmm and so if that was the case, would you still be inclined to rent or would you lean more towards selling and then be quiet? So, and then with that being the case with such a low amount of margin, if something came up, particularly on a home like yours, I don't need to tell you, things are expensive to fix. Is that something that you'd be willing to maintain for an extended period of time and then be quiet, right? If you did, and then I went the route, if you did get the capital, like what could you do with it that would be beneficial for you? And Jose was like, yeah, I could, be in a position where I could like actually buy something with, and if something popped up, I could take advantage of an opportunity. And I asked him, do you think that's a position that you would want to put your family in versus having the capital be tied up here? And he was like, yeah, it's probably a better choice, right? By asking those questions. I also mentioned too, so you can either go the pain route, which is what Jose's doing, or you can go the pleasure route. Pain route, and I started with a little bit of pain. Have you ever been a long distance landlord? Jose's going even more. What do you think you could get for rent? What if I told you, because we do a lot of business in this geographic area, or I actually own a property around here and it's renting for this amount. If you knew that the marketplace would bear that, would you still be inclined to wait? So that's the pain route. Pleasure route is if you could get the capital, what would be the benefit, right? How would that serve you and your family if you were able to extract the capital and have it sit in an account earning 4 or 5%. That's why I said that, because I'm like, right now it's not really earning anything. So again, either one's okay. The goal and objective though is to continue to dig to get clear.
And I think all I'm doing too as well too is I'm basically like, the reason I'm going into what could you rent it for? What is the rent? Is more or less to get an understanding of what their situation is. And here's another question I may ask. It'd be like, okay, and how much equity do we have on the property? And then I may calculate a return on equity calculation for them. So, like, let's say that somebody's making $2,000 of positive cash flow, but they have $800,000 in equity. Or let me ask you guys this as a consumer: if somebody's making $2,000 of positive cash flow, is that good or bad?
It's pretty good.
No, the answer depends on how much equity you have tied up in there.
Yeah.
So, like, let's say that you're making $2,000 positive cash flow, Novello, but you have $100,000 in equity. That's very good. So the way you do that is, let's say $2,000 a month, multiply it by 12. That's $24,000 in a year. Let's say they have 100,000 in equity, divided by 100,000. That is a 24% return on cash flow on their money. That is insane. That is phenomenal. Now, let's say that's $24,000 a year. You divide it by 800,000 in equity. That comes out to a 3% return on cash flow. Obviously, that's not factoring in any principal pay down. It's not factoring in any appreciation. But if you just do it based on cash flow, they're earning a 3%. So when Aaron said you can take that money and invest it into a high yield account, which maybe could earn you like 4%, that's basically like, okay, like less risk, high yield account. It's more liquid. There's less market volatility attached to that versus, hey, you're earning 3% on the 800,000. So that guy could literally take the money, put it almost anywhere else and earn better than the 3% and have less risk associated with it. Now, if they're doing it as a safety blanket, then it's more than just the numbers. But what I wanted to say is having additional options and really understanding their needs. So like Aaron having a little bit of background of like a high yield account. I had a situation the other day where the guy is like, look, the reason I want to turn it into a rental is I'm probably going to only live for the next 10 years. And my kids will get the step up in basis whenever I pass away. So I'm considering going in that direction because my kids will save about $300,000 to $400,000 in taxes because it's a $2.6 million property. So I provided him with an option. I said, have you ever thought about doing a structured installment sale? He's like, no, what is that? And then I explained it to him. There's a video on my YouTube channel on what that is. And that was a solution for him to pay less capital gain taxes and not have to rent out the property, which to me, it's a benefit because I get paid if I help him sell it. And to him, it's a benefit because all he was saying is, I'm looking for a way to reduce the capital gain taxes. And I provided him with a solution to that.
Yeah. So the idea is when this comes up, I think, again, like we started off with, a lot of people get like, dejected or perhaps frustrated, where instead I should go back into curiosity mode and be like, hey, so tell me again, like specifically what you're looking to accomplish and why. Ask these series of detailed questions to help someone self-discover like which option is in their best interest. Because if it is in their best option to rent it, I've told, and I'm sure you have lots of clients, hey, you should stay renting the property, based on everything you've been kind enough to share with me. So let's say you say, hey, I'm wondering, Jose, we work with a lot of clients where they're moving out of town and sometimes they hold on to a property with the goal and intention or the idea perhaps of sometime moving back. Is that a serious consideration or option for you guys? And then be quiet. And if they're like, yeah, like this is only like a 3-year thing and I plan on coming back, it's like, okay, well, that's something to consider. Right? What do you think the probability is? Because I'm aware too that, once you move, the kids get in schools and everything, it becomes difficult to kind of extract yourself. Like, is it a possibility that you guys would be out there and then end up deciding to stay permanently, or is that not an option at all? Like, you just keep asking questions to really determine what's in
their best interest or not.
Well, what's their goal and objective? What do they actually accomplish? Like, what do they want? And then based on that, we can then provide guidance in terms of what would be the best option that would serve them best. What's up, little guy? So that's really what's going on here. You know what I'm saying? I think some agents think that like, oh, I need to convince them to sell it, and that's not necessarily the case. It may make sense for them to do something else.
And then if they have it as a safety blanket, like if they say, "Hey, I'm not gonna move back to California," and be like, "Okay, well, it sounds like the only reason for wanting to keep it then is to hope that obviously the marketplace appreciates." But it sounds like you have no plans to move back to California. Then I may ask a question, be like, "What are your expectations of the real estate market for the next couple of years?" And then they may say, "Well, I'm hoping that the real estate market goes up." I'm like, "Well, look, this decision to keep the property or sell it, it's actually a little bit more complex than just hoping that the marketplace goes up." Let me give you a quick example. I- If you were making this decision, and at this point, like, be like, well, let me give you a quick example. You obviously already know, and we talked about the fact that you're exempt up to $500,000 as a married couple if you decide to basically sell it now versus keep it as a rental. So if you do decide to sell the property, you would have to sell it before the 3-year mark. So my question to you is, what are your expectations of the market for the next 3 years? Do you think the market's going to go up? Do you think the market's going to stay flat? Or do you think that the market will go down? Because if you don't sell before that 3-year mark, now you're subject to paying an additional whatever amount in taxes, which means the market would have to go up by more than that amount. Now, here's the way I would think about it, Annabelle. The way I would think about it would be like, if you were making this decision in 2012 and you held on to it until 2015, the marketplace went up. That was a great decision. But let's say that instead of 2012, you were making this decision in 2007. And in 2007, the market went up slightly and then it went down. So because it went down, now you had to hold on to the property for longer than 3 years, which means you're subject to that tax now, which means instead of selling at 800, now you might have to sell at 900, and now you would have to wait 10 years instead of 3 years. Would you be okay with that?
That's right.
And then I may finish it off with, how much of a risk taker are you?
Yeah, it's
Or
good.
how confident are you that it's gonna go up, and how much of a risk taker are you?
Yeah, and what just popped up for me is like when you let them know about the capital gains, because usually they're not thinking about that. That's pain. Remember, you can either hit pain or pleasure. So it's a pain thing. It's like, so, what that would mean is that in order for this to make financial sense for you, when you sold it, you would have to sell it for at least 20% more than what you could get today in order to just break even on that capital gain. So in order to have it make financial sense, you would have to sell it for more than 20% than what we could get today. So I guess the question is does that seem like a realistic expectation to you? And then be quiet. And then it's like, hey, I know the difference between like what you want and what is reasonable at the moment is it's different. And I want to be respectful of that. I respect every penny. I'm also aware that it's probably not an amount that would like substantially change the course of your life one way or the other. And under normal conditions, do you think you would gamble like 20% of what this property is worth just to see what happens? Shh.
Sure.
And then be quiet and see what they say. Right. And some people might be like, yeah, like, okay, great. And then we move in that direction. Other people, though, because again, oftentimes that's a knee jerk reaction to it's not in alignment with what their expectations are price wise.
And it could be a stalling mechanism as well too, like that it just hit them. Like, it's funny because I had this lady that her expectations today were like $100,000 higher than when the marketplace is, and I could see her like almost like stalling a little bit as well too. But Um, I think that covers that one basically.
Yeah.
I really like giving that example of 2008 or 2007 versus 2012 because that could happen, And now if they hold on to it for more than 3 years, they're subject to that capital gain tax unless they move back into the property, but it complicates things so much basically. And if they have no plans to move back into the property, most people will not have a long distance rental. And guess what? If it doesn't turn into a listing for you right now, I would stay in touch with them because it may turn into a listing next year or the year after that for you.
Yeah. Agreed. 100%. So
Right.
again, there's a common theme is like when what we did last week, when they said, hey, I want to think about it, you acknowledge, right? It doesn't mean I agree. It's like, yeah, I get it. It's a big decision. You want to make sure you make it the best decision possible. Here, same thing. Hey, we're not sure what we're going to do. And then I start to ask questions. That's okay. My job's to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So that's subtract. First, I acknowledge I don't agree. Those are different. But then I start to ask questions. Just so I'm clear, my intention before I go is just to ask a couple questions again before I go, because that alleviates pressure, right? They think like, okay, we're done here. What I'd like to do is just ask you a couple questions. The goal and objective would be is to help you to get as clear as possible so you can make the decision that you feel is best as far as how to proceed. And whatever you decide, Jose, I'll support you 100%. Again, demonstrates I'm not attached to the outcome and that it's in their best interest. And then you proceed to start to ask questions systematically, whether it's, I just want to think about it in general, where I'm fleshing out those common objections, which is like, am I going to sell? Price? Is it me, or is it perhaps professional fee? And we just put it all on the table so we can handle it. And this one, it's like where they say something specifically. Well, Jose, all this makes sense. We really have to rethink if now's the right time for us to sell. So they're going to be specific versus like a general where I need to flesh it out. Here's just a specific. And if they do that, again, the track is the same. I acknowledge, I get it. It's a big decision. You want to make sure you're making the best decision possible. And then before I go, what I'd like to do is just ask you a couple of quick questions, just so you can get as clear as possible on this. So that way you can decide what you feel is best. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Fair enough. And then we go into systematically asking questions.
And then we handled the, hey, we're considering renting. There's probably even other, and I didn't even think about this until now that we're talking about, there's probably other things that would cause them to stall. Like, for example, like, I had a client that's like, well, look, I need to talk to my CPA, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And what we're trying to help you guys here is to help them move forward in the process. So what I did the other day is like, look, can I make a recommendation to you? It sounds like you're not 100% sure whether or not you're ready to sell the property or not. It sounds like you got to collect a little bit of additional information. At the same time, it does sound like you need help with this, this, and this. Here's what I would recommend, and here's what I can do for you. I can actually make our agreement contingent upon you getting approval from your CPA, or contingent upon you collecting this, this, and this. This way, if for whatever reason your CPA tells you, hey, look, it doesn't make financial sense for you to sell, no harm, no foul. We can basically just rip up the agreement. At the same time, this would allow us to start helping you in terms of this, this, and this. Would that work for you?
Love
And
that.
it's basically like a way of getting a contract signed contingent upon whatever objection they're giving you in that situation. And you can make it contingent on anything. You can make it like contingent upon whatever it is,
Yeah. And one of the things that I've learned, which is like really helpful, because again, we think that people are thinking being like humans are thinking beings that feel. We're really feeling beings that think. People will spend all this time getting like analytical information and then make a emotional decision. They interview 6 agents to try to gather all this information. Like, we went with Bob because like it just felt right. I'm like, dude, you wasted all your time. You know what I mean? So, but when people are like at a place to, it all makes logical sense. The natural tendency for most is to stall. And what I know from StoryBrand, which is true, is that the hero, which in this instance is the client, the hero never takes action without external prompting. My job is to help them to cross that bridge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I would say, like, if I can really feel and sense like they really want to do this, like, I want to talk to this person. I'm just like, okay. Well, what I'm kind of sensing from you, Jose, is that, well, let me ask this before I ask that question. Having spent some time together today as a team, having had our initial conversation via telephone, seen what you've seen online, if you do decide to sell it, have you already decided that you would want me and my team to help you? And they're like, well, yeah. Okay. And then having reviewed this information and kind of, gone through those questions that we asked and really getting clarity around this, have you decided that getting the home sold is actually really in your best interest? Yes. Okay. So then really in talking to these other parties, what you're really going to talk to them about is more so about support. It's not permission. You've already decided you want to do this. So how about we do this, right? I can send you all the documentation electronically via DocuSign, and the additional terms and conditions, I'll just put in there that it's contingent upon, like you said, whatever, upon you having conversation or whatever, or it's contingent upon you having a conversation and wouldn't go into effect. I'll post date it. until Monday or whatever. And this way, we'll already have taken care of that. My team will begin to prep to proceed because it sounds like more likely than not, like that's what we're going to do. And then we could take it from there. How's that sound? And they're like, okay. So this idea, like, it sounds like, Jose, you've already decided internally, and really in having a conversation with your wife or with your pastor or with whoever, it's really about asking for support, not for permission. And nobody, you say that to most people, are like, I don't need permission. You know what I'm saying? Like if I said that to Jose, I'm like, yeah, like you're really going to Mariela like to talk to her like about support, not permission. He'd be like, bro, I don't need permission. And then he would be like, yeah, like
Which causes the process to move forward as
it
well too,
causes
because
the process to move
now
forward.
it becomes like an ego thing. Like I don't need permission, bro. I'll do this right now.
I'll
I'll do
do it
this
right
right
now.
now. Right now.
Hey, have you ever seen there's this skit which is hilarious? This guy makes a call and he's like, yeah, and he's trying to be nice to the guy, right?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we're calling because you want a vacation and you just need to pay this amount. And he's like, no, I'm not, I appreciate you calling. And he hangs up on him. And he's like, huh. He calls him back. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I think we got disconnected. He's like, yeah, was there anything else you wanted to say? And he was like, well, I mean, you called me. He's like, yeah, but do you want to buy the Las Vegas trip? He was like, no. Bang, he hangs up on him again. He's like, oh, he calls him back, right? He's like, how dare you? Bang, he hangs up on him again. By the fifth time, he's like, I want to buy well, what if I want to buy it? What if I want to buy the thing? He's like, yeah, but are you gonna? He's like, well, I don't know. Bang, he hangs up on him again. And then he calls him back. He's like, here, you need to take my credit card down right now. You know what I mean? So this idea that people's initial inclination is to pump the brakes, and what Roy is saying there is true. Like if you read the book Story Brand, part of the guide's role in the story is to not only equip the hero, which in this instance is the client, with a plan, it's also to call them to action. That's why most people's media doesn't work, because they position, what's up, Venti Goff? They position themselves as the hero, right? Not as the guide, but then they never ask anybody to do anything. So when heroes aren't called to action, do you know what they do, Jose? They just watch you. You have to call them to action, right? And that's part of your job. It's part of your role as the guide.
Yeah, I think that was big for me about helping people make decisions and helping move the process along, because people's natural inclination is to stall. So this is a way that you can you can make it contingent upon absolutely anything, basically. Great.
Exactly.
So I would say the second thing in the track. So first one is, have you already decided that you want to sell the property? Second one is the price. I would just say that the only thing to add on that, because we've done several videos on price already,
Yeah.
is more or less like, okay, what were you thinking? Like, be like, okay, but just remember, you go through the talk track, and then at the end, once you identify, so like, you say, have you already decided you want to sell the property? If you say no, you don't handle it right there. You say, okay, great. Let me make a note of this. Let me revisit this in just a few moments. Then you go over the price. You're like, hey, look, obviously I like for it to be more. I'm sure that you would too. Or we pretty much in agreement that right around 900,000 is the price that the market's recommending that we need to be at. If you notice any sort of hesitation, you're like, okay, this is one of the things that we need to talk about. You set it aside and then you recircle back. After you come back to it, you can say, okay, look, what were you thinking as it relates to price? And then it just becomes the pricing portion of the presentation again. As I
That's it.
mentioned to you, there's 2 pricing strategies, blah, blah, blah.
And
Would
then
you be
before
okay?
we get into it, which I know you've done before, it's just I don't want people to forget it, is let's say you flesh it out the way Jose just did, and they're like, okay, yeah, I mean, it seems to be like you just want to have some additional conversation clarity around the price. So if we can come to an agreement on how to position the property price wise, do you think there'd be any other reason why we couldn't proceed right now? And they look at each other like, I don't think so. I'm like, okay, so tell me, what were you thinking?
Thinking, basically.
And that's intentional because I want to, before you start to verbally vomit, which what most people do, I want to know where they're coming from, like what they're thinking. I remember being, I remember being at an appointment, and this guy, he was a family member of somebody that was on our team. And I went on the appointment because I knew it was her big brother. So I knew he was going to kind of
Yeah.
muscle her into doing what he wanted. So I went, and it was very helpful because they, self-discovered where they need to be at price wise. We're getting ready to sign the paperwork. And he's like, wait, before we do this, like, what about the family discount? And in my head, I'm already like just knocking off like points. I'm like, okay, like he's like, yeah, last time I worked with my sister, like, I got a discount. I was like, all right, as you're aware, we normally don't do that. At the same time, I understand the dynamics. So what were you thinking? Instead of me, I was like, what were you thinking? He's like, well, she gave me like $1,500 for closing costs. I'm like, and I pulled a Jose. I was like, we normally wouldn't do that. But for you, we can make that happen.
Do an exception.
Yeah. In my head, though, I was dropping points. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, and I think the same is true with price. You know what I'm saying? So instead of getting into this argument, just like, hey, what were you thinking? And then when they tell you, well, I was thinking like, 850. Okay. And I want to be clear, Jose, that's an option because you're the boss here. This is your property. My job is just to help you to make an informed decision. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So let's look at that together as a team, and then we can get into it. But that bridge, I know you've pointed out that like I do that, and I don't really recognize that that's what I'm doing. But you called it like a term, like a bridge. That's critical. That you actually say something like that to get you from one place to the next. So when they're like, and not allow your body to like betray you, or your body language to betray you. So when they're like 750, not to be like, you know what I mean? Like, God, like, are you serious? You know what I mean? Instead, just to be like, okay, yeah, that's an option. I mean, I want to be clear, Jose, you are the boss. My job is to help you to make an informed decision. It's never to talk you in to doing anything and then go into handling it.
And the other thing I wanted to point out is funny because I went, there's an agent on my team who used to be on another team before. And he told me that the way that he was taught to present price is to give them a number. And he saw me present price. And he's like, dude, there wasn't any conflict. Like you gave them options and they got to make the decision as to what they wanted. And he's like, at my previous company, it'd be like this. He's like, I remember sitting down with a seller telling him that he's going to sell for 1.7. He's like, look, I want 2 million. He's like, you're not going to get the 2 million. You're going to get 1.7. The guy lists it for 2 million and it just sold recently at 1.7. And I'm just like, bro, I'm like, he's like, yeah. And commission was good. Everything was good. And I'm like, look, dude, this whole conversation about price is very, very important. And we've got plenty of videos on that. So let's say that you address that. Then the final one is going to be like, okay, now, obviously, now have you already decided that you want me to, so after our meeting here today, obviously, I imagine that you've read some of our reviews online. You've checked out our track record. We've met in person. Am I the type of agent that you want working for you, fighting tooth and nail to help you get every single dollar out of this property? Or you can say, have you already decided that you want me to help you with the sale? And then just shut up and listen to see what they say. They're either going to say, yes, we've decided, which is good. That's what you want. Or they're say, well, look, we haven't really decided. We're actually planning on interviewing other agents. Or they're going to say, no, we actually haven't decided that we want you.
And an important point, which Jose does well, he's just running through it quickly, is when you ask them, like, have you already decided? Make sure you smile. Like, remember,
he does that. Decided that you want me to help you with the sale.
And he smiles. He like, yeah, have you already decided that you would like me to help you with the sale? And then nonchalantly, just like,
yeah, nod your head.
Just nod your head. That's all. And then they're either going to say yes, no, or maybe. And then from there, the only other thing that it could be is commission. That's the only other thing. So if you see where they're like, yeah, Jose, what up, Pace? Pace is in the Pace is on the chat on Instagram. So
hey, hold on. Let me button up my tie.
Yeah, you got to button the tie up, bro. You know what I mean? So if they say, well, yeah, Jose, like we really liked you and stuff, like, you can sense I've already boxed out the other objections. I've already boxed out, is it price? Are you going to sell? Because sometimes sellers' expectations aren't in alignment with current market conditions. And they're like, nope, we've definitely decided that. Boom, check that off. And again, the way I think about this is I'm clearing the room by room with objections, right? So you remain calm and clear and you just go room by room, right? That's the way SWAT do. When they go into a room, go into a home, they clear the room by room. So the first room is like, if they say they want to think about it, great. Well, there's 3 decisions the seller needs to make prior to putting their home on the market. So before I go, what I'd like to do is to go over them with you. So that way you can decide what you feel is best. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. The first decision a seller needs to make prior to putting their home on the market is if they're even going to sell it. sometimes when homeowners see what the marketplace is willing to bear, that's not in alignment with their expectations or perhaps what they need from a net perspective in order to make the move happen. And they decide to do something different, maybe hold on to it, rent it, something like that. Now, based on our conversation and preparation for connecting, that's not a serious consideration for you. You're definitely selling, correct? And they're like, yes. So now I've just taken that off the table. The second decision a seller needs to make prior to putting the home on the market is the price. Now, I'm imagining that you would like it to be more. I know I sure would as well. At the same time, having seen what's active on the market and not selling and seen what's sold and closed most recently, are we in agreement that the market is showing us somewhere around, 550 seems to be reasonable? Not me. The market is showing us somewhere around 550 seems to be reasonable. And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, I'd like it to be more, but yeah, okay. And then that leads us to the third decision a seller needs to make prior to putting their home on the market, and that's who's going to help you. I mean, you strike me to be someone who's super straightforward, Jose. I'm the same way. So having seen the information we sent over in preparation for connecting, we had that initial conversation. Based on our conversation today, do you feel comfortable and confident with me, smile, that not only I could help you sell this home, I would also look out for your best interest? And then very, nonchalantly, not like this, but just like, nodding your head, yes. And if they still are like, well, there's two routes you can go. The only thing left that's on the table to flesh out is professional fee. So it's like, gosh, Jose, what I'm sensing from you is that like you guys are really ready to proceed. There's just something perhaps that you want a little bit more clarity about. Is it the professional fee? Is it the commission? Just get it on the table. Because how many of us as agents have you've gone on an appointment, they said they want to think about it, you call them back, they listed with somebody else, and you find out that they listed it because of a term or a condition, and you were like, yo, I would have done that too. But the reason you weren't able to actually have that conversation with them is because you didn't go through the process of fleshing out what the actual objection was. And if they do that and they're like, yeah, it is, the professional fee, you're like, okay. And I appreciate your willingness to share that, Jose, because if we're going to enter into an agreement with one another, it needs to be based on trust. And part of that trust is being able to be straightforward with one another. So I guess I'm wondering if we could come to an agreement, which I'm sure we will, that will not be a reason why we don't do business. I'm sure we'll come up with something that's mutually beneficial to all parties. You strike me to be reasonable. I'm reasonable. If we could agree, it sounds like there wouldn't be any other reason why we couldn't proceed today. Is that right? And again, what I'm doing is I'm boxing that in. I'm setting aside that objection. That's what that technique's called. It's called a set aside. It's like there's a boulder between me and you. And what I'm doing is picking up that boulder and I'm putting it over here and being like, yo, if we can handle that thing over there, is there any reason why we couldn't proceed? I'm like, no, I don't think so. And then you use that magical term, what were you thinking? Because I want them to speak first. And then we can go into handling it. You see what I mean? So that's one route they can go, right? If you use all, you box them all in, that's the only thing that's really left to have a conversation about.
And I think we've done the videos already. So we've done the videos on the pricing, the commission's the same thing. What were you thinking? How would you handle it, Novello, if somebody's like, well, look, to be quite honest, I actually have not decided that, like, I want you to help me with the sale, or I've got another agent that I'm considering interviewing basically right after you. Because I think that's where people, those are the ones that I don't believe we've covered 100%. So how would you handle I haven't actually decided? I know how I would handle it as well, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think that there's like a couple routes you can go. So one is if you're sensing, and this is where you have to really have like some emotional intelligence and like kind of what I would call like prospecting IQ. You've just done it so much that like you get like a feel and a sense. I'm sure you've been with people where you get a feel and a sense where if you keep going, it's going to not be good.
Yeah.
So if I feel that, I'll be like, look, I just want to be clear. My intention in having this conversation with you is not to be pushy at all. My intention instead, bless you, my intention instead is just to demonstrate to you that I'm super excited to have the opportunity to earn your business. And I'm not afraid to ask you to make a great decision, just like I'm not going to be afraid to ask a buyer to write a full price offer on your property. Right. So I want to just like diffuse that. What I would also do is if I've exhausted all the methodology, I would close to come back. You know what I'm saying? So I'd be like, okay. And then I start to like, pack stuff up. So they get a visual signal that it's done. Like, all right, so I know you indicated that your intention is to talk to that other agent. and that's okay, and that you want to do that emphatically before making a decision. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, because I was looking at this in preparation for connecting, is I can circle back. We can reconnect tomorrow after you've had that meeting. So that way we can review all the information together as a team, and you can make the decision that you feel is best. And again, whatever you decide, I'll support you. Would that be okay? So I just want to close to try to get back in front of them. That's one route you can take if you sense that if you continue to keep going, it's going to be detrimental to the relationship. The other route you could go is yeah, I really appreciate that. And I know the primary reason why, and I mean this lovingly, Jose, 90% of the time, 95% of the time when I meet with clients, they see our track record, they see our reviews, over 500 5-star reviews, and we meet in person, they do decide to hire us. I know that, people tell, people, and even online, they say to interview, more than one agent. Do you know why they do that? Because in our business, 5% of the agents sell 95% of the properties. Did you know that?
I didn't.
So the reason why they're telling you to interview more than one, so that way you can find the probability that you find one that's doing, a large amount of business and therefore is competent and professional and reliable, it's increased. And do you know what the great news is, Jose?
No.
You found that one on the first shot. We've done X amount of transactions in the last 12 months. I mean, is that the type of track record you'd want working for you?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like you feel comfortable and confident with me. So the only reason perhaps you may want to have a conversation with others is maybe about price or commission. That'd be the only thing, right?
It would.
Yeah. So tell me this, because I want you to feel good about what we're doing. Obviously, you feel good about me and you've made that decision already. And I'm sure you don't want to spend 3 hours of your life talking to other agents. You could be spending that with your family and your kids and stuff. So how about we do this? How about we have a conversation about price and the professional fee? I'm positive we'll come up with something that's mutually beneficial. And then once we do, we could just take care of the appropriate paperwork and proceed. How's that sound?
You know what I just thought about?
Yeah.
It was funny because one of the ones I would get stuck on will be like, "Well, Aaron, you're actually our first interview.
Yeah.
We want to go ahead and interview like 2 or 3 different people. I mean, we're just fresh at this process." And what Neil Weichel said was brilliant. He's like, "Well, look, Jose, like in most conditions, most people would always recommend that you get more than one opinion, right? Like if you're
Yep.
buying a car, you're buying this. Now, what they really mean is that you need to interview as many people as you have to until you find the right one. You actually got really lucky. Can I explain to you what I mean?
Sure.
You found the very best agent on your very first try.
Yeah.
So, and then he goes into like why he's the very best agent. Can I make a recommendation?
Yeah.
Let's get started.
It's the same thing. It's because that's, I'm heavily influenced by Neil, but it's the same thing where it's it sounds like you've already decided that you want that type of track record. I mean, it's not a question of
Yeah.
if you feel comfortable with me and I can get the home sold. I'm imagining the only reason you would want to have and imagining is responsible semantics, right? I'm imagining that the only reason that you would want to talk to other agents is perhaps around price and commission or professional fees. Is that right? And you smiled. You're like, yeah. It's okay. So may I make a recommendation? Sure. Well, how about we do this? How about, because I want you to feel good about what we're doing. How about we focus on each one of those? We come to an agreement in terms of where we're going to get started and what is mutually beneficial in terms of a professional fee would actually serve you best, because the fee is a tool that we use to market the property, and we can go over that. And then, we could take care of the appropriate paperwork and save you 2 hours of your time that you could be spending with Mariela and your 2 sons. I mean, how's that sound? And you would, I know you, bro. If somebody did that to you, you fucking smile and be like, okay. You know what I mean? You'd yeah, that's fine.
Well, and then even what I've done now with a track record, that I have, I would say something along the lines like, "Hey, Aaron, is experience important to you?"
Yep.
And they're like, "Well, of course." And then I'll ask them, be like, "Well, how will you know if somebody is experienced?" Well, a lot of times the response that I get, "Well, when I meet with them, I'll be able to tell just based on what they're telling me." And to be quite honest, like, that's, like, a really shitty way of finding out if somebody has experience. Because if somebody's a bullshit artist, they can bullshit their way, like, into anything.
Yeah.
So, I try to
So
deride push them away from that. Be like, "Well, look,
yeah,
that's one way of doing it. Go." And then
yeah.
I'll
What I was gonna say, what I would say in that instance is like, Jose, as I get older, I pay less attention to what people say and more attention to what they do,
yeah,
because what they do is who they are. I'm aware that we spoke on the phone. I shared with you I was going to send you something via email. That happened, right? Yep. I'm aware that I shared with you that my staff would call you to confirm. That happened, correct? I shared with you that we were going to meet at this time and I was going to send you a reminder. That happened. I shared with you that I would show up promptly and fully prepared to have this conversation. That happened. So I guess what I'm aware of is if we look strictly based on what people do, does it seem as though not only am I committed to helping you get the job done, but with a super high degree of probability, we'll be able to execute? And you're like,
yeah,
yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you've already made a decision that you want me to help. It's really just a question of terms and conditions. So if we could agree on those today, I mean, there wouldn't be any other reason why we couldn't do business, right? It's like, and this is when they either, if it's Jose, he's like, no, or he looks at his wife, he's like, what do you think, honey? I'm like, yeah, I think he's pretty good. And you're like, okay. All right, so let's talk about it. So, and then we get into it, each one. And again, in your mind, I want you to be, I was telling my daughter recently, because she was like, I don't like math class. She started fifth grade. Like, I don't like math. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't really like it either when I was younger, but do you know why? She was like, why? I'm like, because it was the one subject that I actually had to try. And what I told her is that what math helped me to do is it helped me to think linearly. So advanced mathematics, whether it's like algebra 2 or like calculus, whatever, like you don't use that shit today. But what it helps you to do is to think sequentially. So I have to solve this problem first to get an answer in order to plug into this to get the final answer. It makes you think sequentially. So what we're doing here is, if you notice, is that's precisely what we're doing. We're just like walking down a path sequentially, how we get from one place to the next. So when somebody says that and we flesh it out, and I'm like, yeah, it sounds like you've already decided you want me to help. I mean, that's not the issue. Just really an issue of terms and conditions, right? Yeah. So if we could agree on that, any other reason why we couldn't do business? I don't think so. Now that's done. Now we sequentially go to the next room. Okay. Price. Tell me what you were thinking. Well, I'm thinking this. We have a conversation. Here are the pros and cons. What do you think we should do? Okay, we agree. Great. Next one. Move to the next room. Again, sequentially just moving down the path. Now, that's the way our brains work. And we as humans, it's a sense-making mechanism. It helps people to make sense. Like, it's like you're entering into somebody's brain and you're walking them through the process of making a decision, if that makes
mhm,
sense.
yeah. What I was gonna say too is that sometimes, like, it's frustrating for me when I'm getting compared to like an agent that maybe sells like 3 homes a year or 2 homes a year, and they're like trying to like basically almost say like we're at the same level. So that whole thing that I'll do is I'll be like, look, is experience important to you? How will you know if somebody is experienced or not? And they're like, well, I could tell by talking to them. Well, what if I told you that there was a different way that you can verify all this information, and that it would tell you how many homes they've sold in the last 12 months and how many homes they've sold in their career? Would that be helpful to you? So here's the way I recommend that typically homeowners make decisions. Yes, meet with the agent. Yes, get to know them. Yes, get a feel for them. Yes, talk to them. But what I recommend is that you take this information and you combine it with data. Now, when you do that, you're taking a look at how you feel with them, but also you've got data to back it up. And in my opinion, that will help you make the best decision possible. So, can I show you a tool to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, and
They're
what
like,
you're doing is
sure.
is it's you have to be very careful when you go down this path. You have to present it in a manner that is like so like exactly what Jose's doing, because essentially what you're doing is in a very polite way, you're pointing out that there's like somebody who's inferior in terms of their like production. So you have to do it,
In a very
like
well.
in a very systematic kind of professional way. So here's what's interesting. So we have two comments, Jose. One from El Dorado Placer in Sacramento, and one from Jay Just Sold It. And they're both, what if you're a newer agent that hasn't sold a lot of homes? So you have to use what you have. Okay. So
Yeah,
one
it
of the
is
things
for
that
you.
me and Jose get thrown at us all the time as top listing agents, dominant listing agents, is what agents will feed them is like, well, Jose's really busy.
It's busy. You won't even
He's
talk to
busy.
him. You'll
You
talk
won't
to the
even
staff.
talk to him, bro. Like he's gonna send you to like all these different people. Like they feed it to them. So what I have to combat that with is like, yeah, I hear that all the time, Jose. And what's interesting? I don't know if you've ever heard this quote. Ben Franklin said, if you want something done, you give it to somebody who's busy. Yeah. So, what we did to help you to make an apples to apples comparison, because this is a big financial decision for you. For most folks, I don't know if this is true for you, Jose, it's the biggest asset that they own. So hiring somebody to help you facilitate a transaction, I mean, it's a pretty big decision. And usually what people are looking for is experience. Is that something that's important to you?
Oh yeah.
Yes. So,
We're looking for that for sure.
exactly. So what I did in preparation for connecting is I brought something called a real estate report card. And what that is everybody in the multiple listing service has a number, like a social security number, and you can track everything that they do. So what we did is we brought our track record for the last 12 months from the multiple listing service because people could tell you anything, Jose. They're the best and they're the dominant agent and they sell all these homes. They're the neighborhood expert. It's another thing for them to demonstrate to you and with actual data. And you strike me to be someone who would rather look at the data versus what somebody's telling you, right?
Yeah, of course.
You're like, yeah. So here's our track record. And da, 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 da. And I'm curious, did the agent you were talking to, did they talk about their track record? They're like, not really. It's like, well, there's another mechanism that we could use to look it up. I have my phone here. Do you know the first and last name of that agent? And then you look them up on Zillow and you're like, yeah, man, it seems like they're a pretty good agent. They sold like 5 homes in the last 12 months. And they're like, really? And you're like, yeah. So I'm wondering, I mean, for you, and again, I'm sure they're a lovely person. My intention in bringing this to your attention is not to besmirch their character in any way. At the same time, it's a business decision. It's really about helping you net the most and do it quickly and efficiently. If you had one person who's done it, hundreds of times in a time frame where another person's done it 5, which would you want working for you? That's how you handle that. Now, if I'm a newer agent, I would try to go the other route, which is like, yeah, like, I appreciate that. Jose's a great agent. And I guess I'm curious for you personally, like, is it really important to you that the agent that you hire be available to you at all times? And they're like, well, what do you
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. Yeah. So like if you were to call me, would you be like, would it cause a little bit of friction if you had to speak to an assistant or like talk to somebody else before you spoke to like me? I don't know about you, but that bothers me all the time. Like when I call AT&T and I can't get anybody on the phone. Yeah. So like Jose's great. At the same time, he's like super busy and he does a lot of transactions. And being that like that concierge service is important for you. With me, you're going to have my undivided attention. And I'll be with you every step of the way. You'll have access to me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Is that what you're looking for in the agent that you hire? It is. You know what the great news is? You found what you're looking for. You know what I'm saying? Like you just go the opposite route.
And then there's different things that you have over different agents as well too. So like if Jose's office is in Ventura and I'm in Oxnard, I may say something like, and the property's in Oxnard, I may say something, well, look, like is having an agent that has proximity to your home like important to you? Meaning like if somebody calls right now and they're like, look, can you show the property in 5 minutes? I could be there in the next 5 minutes because my office is literally like 5 minutes away. Versus if an agent has their office in Camarillo, that it may take them 30 minutes to get to the property. Meaning if something goes wrong with the property, like if there's like something were to go wrong, I can be there right away. So we're gonna end it today. If you guys want us to continue with this topic, let us know. And then closing statements, Nabello.
So yeah, humans are not thinking beings that feel. We're feeling beings that think. The vast majority of humans, their tendency is to stall when making decisions. And our job as a guide is to call people to action. If you systematically kind of box in objections and you flesh them out, you can get to what the real reason is, and you can actually call them to action so they can make a decision and they can be the hero in their own story. If you do this, you will get paid the big bucks, baby, and that's what I'm interested in. So if you guys are tuning in if you're in South Florida or in close proximity, this next Tuesday, I'm doing a live event where I'll be teaching the listing presentation, how to augment the pricing the compensation conversation and how to document that. We'll go over precisely how to do that. and that's local here. You can DM me and reach out to us. And yeah, we look forward to connecting with you. We're here to add value, and we are the Elite Builders Coast to Coast team. Peace.
Peace out, guys. Later.